Well, here's a question. Could this weekend be the last time we put the clocks back? Assuming you remember to, of course. Well, there are growing calls this lunchtime for exactly that, with a number of campaigners from a number of different causes, actually, saying the current system is outdated. Well, those in favour of not putting the clocks back say their arguments are, frankly, inarguable. It's claimed the overall health of the nation would improve as people could enjoy daylight for longer. Children, they'd benefit, as many of them aren't allowed to leave their homes after dark. They'd be able to play outside for longer, it's suggested. The elderly would also gain from the move. Many also stay indoors when it gets dark because of poor vision or even for fear of assault. They'd get out more. It's estimated up to 100 road deaths could be prevented annually across Britain due to better visibility. And around 450,000 tonnes of CO2 would be saved by people switching their lights on later. It's a done deal, isn't it? But those against a change argue their case is solid as well. One of the main barriers to change is the fact that school children in the north of England, and Scotland in particular, would be walking to school in the dark. Could lead to more road deaths there. Farmers also say it would be less productive. They'd lose an hour of light in the morning, have problems with their livestock, with the whole thing, in fact. Builders say not moving the clocks would hold up work on construction sites. We all know how important construction's been to the economy lately, don't we? So is switching to daylight saving time permanently a good idea? Joining me to discuss that, Daniel Vockins of the Lighter Later campaign, and in Edinburgh for us is Ian McKee, an SNP member of the Scottish Parliament. Gentlemen, a very good afternoon to both of you. Daniel, let's begin with you, if I may. We tried this in 1968, didn't we? We had a trial. The posties hated it, the farmers hated it, the milkmen hated it. What's changed?
Well, after they actually did the review on that study, they found out that it cut hundreds of deaths over the period and that it lasted 1968 to 71. And just today, in fact, as a result of the way that we live our modern lives now, the National Farmers Union in Scotland itself is calling for this bill that we're putting forward to be passed. So old opposition is subsiding, and many of the reasons that in 68 to 71 it wasn't taken forward have now been proven to be false.
Ian McKee, Scottish farmers have changed their minds. They've decided that daylight saving time's a good idea after all. He looked like he was about to make a very important point, so I'll go back to Daniel. Oh, he's back. Ian McKee, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Very good. It's been argued, isn't it, by some, not least our contributor from the other side of the argument here, that Scottish farmers are starting to be a bit more flexible on this now. What's your sense of what people who work in Scottish agriculture, but also those who campaign for road safety, feel about any potential changes?
Well, I think you made a very important point earlier on, that this has been tried in Scotland already, and I'm old enough to have remembered that. And when it was tried in Scotland, it was a total disaster. So you can have as much theory as you like. When you try this in practice, it just doesn't work for Scotland.
Daniel, that's the problem, isn't it? You've got a national split here. I mean, people will say, yes, 80 lives are going to be saved if we do this, but most of them might be saved in the south of England. What happens in Scotland?
Simply not true. When we last tried this in 1968-71, there was a greater number of lives saved in Scotland than across the rest of the UK, so it does work in practice. We saved 8.6% of road deaths in Scotland last time this was tried, and today a new independent piece of research has been launched by the Policy Studies Institute that shows it would save 20 Scottish lives on the road every year, not to mention the vulnerable road users like school children that your co-presenter mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, Ian McKee, there are so many arguments mounted both for and against this, aren't there? One of them's to do with tourism, isn't it? It says, look, if your end of the day gets lighter, people have got more time to be tourists, people have got more time to pursue sporting activities. We know how important it is to get people out and about. These seem pretty solid arguments, don't they? What do you say to them?
Well, we had these problems, as I say before. We had tourists in 1971. We found that it didn't cause a tremendous improvement in tourism to Scotland because of this. The fact is that the daylight hours that we have in Scotland suit Scotland. We didn't want to change then, and we don't want to change now.
Daniel Vockins, these arguments come round every single year, it feels like. Why do you feel the wind's in your sails now?
Well, not least this report that's been launched today. I mean, it shows conclusively, independently, that it would create 7,000 new jobs in Scotland tourism sector alone, and that it would save these 20 lives on the road. It's time to get away from conjecture on this argument and go with the independent research. And what's more, actually, the last 2 times the Scottish public have been polled on this issue, they've actually come out in favour. So there's the case in Scotland, which is now rock solid, and there's also the case across the rest of the UK. In a time of recession, we need to be creating jobs in the economy, and this is a perfect way to do it at very little cost.
Ian McKee, is it possible to see this argument without necessarily projecting it through the prism of the national interest? Is it possible to look at this without just coming at it from a Scottish perspective? And further to that, do you feel that perhaps this debate is moving a bit away from your position now?
Well, we have to look at it from the national perspective because apart from anything else, the matter of time zones is a reserved matter to Westminster, and the Scottish Parliament doesn't have any say in that except we can give our advice. And the advice that I'm giving is for no change, simply because we have taken soundings from Scottish business, from Scottish farmers, from all sorts of Scottish sources, and they are all against it. The Secretary of State for Scotland is against the change. If things were as clear-cut as been suggested, that wouldn't be the case. But the majority of responsible opinion in Scotland is in favour of the status quo, and so am I.
OK, Ian, Daniel, thanks both very much indeed. See you same time next year, same debate.